everybody, it's New York Railfan 202 here, and welcome back to another episode of Engines of Metro North. In this episode, we'll be taking a look at the ACMU. And now, without further ado, let's get started. In the years following World War II, the New York Central was finally able to explore options to replace their old passenger cars and EMUs on the Harlem and Hudson lines. The cars currently running on these lines were heavy and outdated, as many of them entered service at the start of electric service on the line in 1909. With many of their older EMUs failing, the New York Central decided to make an order for 100 cars to the St. Louis Car Company. This order would be paid for by the New York Central themselves. The EMU ordered would be an ACMU of the 4500 series, the first cars produced in this new ACMU series. The cars would be revolutionary when compared to the cars they would replace. They were much lighter and more aerodynamic. The old cars were modeled after traditional heavy metal coaches with heavy electric control equipment added on. These ACMUs would be of an all-new design, and they would have air conditioning, sealed windows, and camshaft-driven motors, which provided smoother and faster acceleration. The cars also had seating the classic 3x2 layout. The cars were far from modern, as they still had two sets of manual doors per side and could access low-level platforms. All ACMUs were in a single unit configuration with cabs on both ends, unlike future EMUs bought by the railroad. All ACMUs had 400 horsepower and weighed 144,000 pounds. The cars had a top speed of 80 miles per hour and reached that speed while in service. The cars had four 100 horsepower GE 1240 traction motors, and the cars were a huge step up for the New York Central and commuters alike, and the improvements were welcomed by both parties. Once the 1950s rolled around, the railroads faced competition from other methods of transportation, such as cars and planes, and this meant that the great American railroads were starting to suffer. The New York Central was no different, as they could not afford to order any more cars. But the condition of the cars still operating were rapidly deteriorating, and something had to be done. The New York Central couldn't scrape together enough cash to place an order until 1962, when they ordered 26 ACMU cars, and rather than being built by the St. Louis Car Company, these cars and all future ACMUs would be built by the Pullman Standard Company. These cars would be the 4600 series, which was slightly different from the earlier 4500 series. The 4600 series cars had smaller windows and lacked a window opposite the engineer's position in the cab. 26 cars was all that the New York Central could afford, and it wasn't enough. Realizing this, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey stepped in and ordered 27 cars from the Pullman Standard Company. These cars would be the 4700 series. The 4600 series and 4700 series looked very similar, except there was one difference, and it was that the windows were slightly lower based on passenger feedback. Even with the addition of the 27 cars, there was still a shortage, so in 1955, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey placed an order for 34 more 4700 series cars. The Long Island Railroad also ordered a car from the ACMU series in 1963 to support a service increase in passengers traveling to the 1964 World's Fair. These cars were almost identical to the 4700 series ACMUs, but with some differences to better suit the Long Island Railroad. These cars had automatic doors and automatic speed control. The cars also used four 100 horsepower Westinghouse 1453A traction motors rather than the GE traction motors of other ACMUs. The Long Island Railroad would order 30 of these cars in two classes. The first made up of 12 cars that had control cabs on each end, and the second class of 18 cars were power trailers with no cabs. These cars were nicknamed Zip cars, as they were much faster than the older Long Island Railroad equipment. With the financial condition of the railroad rapidly deteriorating, there was no more money for future orders, and with the public commuting by other ways, there was little government support as well. In 1968, the New York Central was merged into Penn Central, along with the Pennsylvania Railroad and later the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad. This merger was supposed to relieve the financial trouble of all three railroads. However, it didn't. Penn Central's financial state was always bad, meaning that there was no money for further car purchases. The poor financial state of the railroad prompted the state to support local commuter service. However, the 4700 series ACMUs were the last model in the series, with only 217 ACMUs being produced by either company. With state funds, Penn Central was finally able to purchase new cars, and they did so as soon as they could. In 1971, Penn Central received 171 new M1 railcars built by Budd. These cars were more modern than the ACMUs, and could only use high-level platforms. This made the low-level boarding feature of the ACMUs unnecessary for the rest of its life, as it was almost never used after 1971. The 4500 series was 20 years old, and preferably would have been rebuilt to extend their useful lives. However, due to the avoided maintenance of these cars in the late 1950s, it was thought that it would be best if these cars were replaced with the new M1A rail cars. This left a combined fleet of M1s and 4600 and 4700 EMUs in service when Conrail took over the commuter service in 1976. As for the MP75s on the Long Island Railroad, they did not last long as EMU cars. Once the Long Island Railroad's M1s arrived, the MP75s were converted into P75 unpowered locomotive-hauled coaches, and they survived in service until 1999 with the arrival of the C3 bilevels that same year. Even with the arrival of the Bud M3 in 1982, the 4600 and 4700 series cars remained in service, with few being retired. However, as Metro-North sought to modernize their lines by implementing cab signaling, this would mean that all ACMUs still in service would need to be equipped with them. This resulted in 34 cars being sent to Morris Knudsen for a heavy rebuild and the addition of cab signals. The remaining 34 cars would receive a lighter in-house rebuild at Metro-North's Croton Harmon shop and would not be fitted with cab signals. This resulted in signal-less cars being placed in the middle of train sets, while cab signal-equipped cars led and ended the train sets for the rest of the car's service lives. With Metro-North extending electrification from North White Plains to southeast on the Harlem line, the ACMUs were originally able to operate on this section of track. However, with the 1997 mandate requiring equipment operated over grade crossings to have ditch lights, they were permanently restricted from this section of track. They were still able to operate on all other electrified parts of the Metro-North system, as the Harlem line north of North White Plains is the only Metro-North trackage to be electrified by third rail and have grade crossings. In the later years of the car's life, the doors of the cars were often left open as the cars still lacked automatic doors. These cars were usually used on rush hour locals on the Harlem and Hudson lines, due to their slightly slower speed than the other cars in service. And by the 2000s, the cars were ready for replacement. In 1999, Metro-North awarded a contract to Bombardier for a replacement of all of the ACMU cars, as well as the Bud M1s. This replacement would be called the M7, and with the first M7s arriving in 2004, the ACMUs on Metro-North were retired as soon as they could be that same year. All ACMUs were scrapped, all except 1128 and 1171, which are currently preserved at the Danbury Railway Museum. All in all, the ACMU lasted a lot longer than it should have, around 45 years. During that time, they proved to be reliable workhorses that Metro-North could always depend on. But in their later years of service, lacking automatic doors and ditch lights made operating them a pain. But when they were introduced, they were the hottest things around. And that is all about the ACMU. If you would like to vote on what I do next, be sure to vote in the top right of the screen. If you liked this video, like it, and if you didn't, dislike it, that's fine too. And if you have anything else to say, leave a comment, and I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye.